So, today's subject is the hero's journey and the spiritual journey. And maybe you have heard Bashar talks. Sometimes Bashar will mention the hero's journey briefly. And I've studied it quite a lot. I've read several books on the subject and of the hero's journey. And if you know nothing about it, don't worry. I will fill you in. I'll briefly give you the background of what this is about, and the point of this video is to tie it in with the spiritual journey and see how similar it actually is, and how every movie and every story has the same blueprint, which is also the blueprint of the spiritual journey of development on all sorts of levels, both on the microcosmic level and also on the macrocosmic level, as we shall discuss. So let's start with the beginning, and that is with the so-called monomyth. That was the start of the whole hero's journey blueprint. And the hero's journey blueprint, for those who don't know, it's the underlying plot point blueprint of almost every Hollywood movie ever made, at least since the original Star Wars from 1979. And it doesn't matter what genre the movie is, they always, if you know anything about Hollywood, if you read any books about screenwriting or these things, then you will know that they don't even consider a movie script that's not based upon the hero's journey blueprint. And the reason for this is because it has proven to be successful, and it all started with Joseph Campbell's release of his famous book in 1949 called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And this is an extensive researched book in which Joseph Campbell has traveled all over the world and studied myths from all sorts of cultures through, not only across the world but also across time, across centuries. And what he concluded after studying all the world's different myths from all over different cultures all over the world, that many of these cultures have been in contact with each other, so that's also interesting to note. And what he concluded was that his major discovery was that all the major myths and stories from all times around the world, they're all basically the same story. He calls it the monomyth. They all follow the same underlying archetypal blueprint. And Star Wars, the original Star Wars, was the very first movie that consciously took advantage of Joseph Campbell's book and his work when they wrote the script and made that movie. And if you lived back then, or if you remember that time, you will know that Star Wars basically changed everything. I mean, it was a major success, and it changed the whole movie industry. And obviously Hollywood really quickly realized the potential of this blueprint as a big moneymaker. So what happened was that Joseph Campbell's book, which is more than 500 pages long with hundreds of footnotes and a lot of references, a very academic work, not fit for everybody to read quickly, right? So what happened was it was very soon honed down to a 7-page memo called A Practical Guide to the Hero with 1,000 Faces, and this memo was written by a Hollywood producer and writer called Christopher Vogler. And he later in the 90s he also wrote a big book on the same subject of the hero's journey, where he basically just expanded on the memo he wrote many years ago. And this book is called The Writer's Journey: Mythic Structure for Writers. And I read both his memo and that book, and I really if you're interested in this subject, you should definitely read this book. It's very good if you're interested in myths and mythology and storytelling and all that, and also for spiritual reasons, if you want to learn more about the archetypal journey, then these books I'm going to talk about here are really worth looking into. But anyway, that's how the hero's journey came to be and be the Hollywood's money-making blueprint. And in time, it was even refined even more than this, and down to even a guide where you can put the major plot points, and you can have page numbers in the as that is how exact it has become. I'm going to talk about that blueprint also, which is even more precise than Vogler's book. Vogler's book is more in general, but it's still very good. But they even made it into a more refined blueprint than that later. And obviously, there's not only one version of the hero's journey blueprint. Different writers will subscribe to different versions of it, and there are many books written about it, and lectures, and not everybody agrees totally on how it. But overall, it is the same. It's just different variations of the same thing. So that is how it all started. And after Star Wars, then they started making movies very much based upon the hero's journey blueprint, because Star Wars was such a big success. And if you can find books about where they analyze a lot of different movies from all sorts of categories and genres, and they find that the blueprint applies to all of them. I mean, so there is really, if you know about the blueprint and you watch a movie, you can't help but see the skeleton behind the underlying structure behind everything that happens, and you're sort of waiting for the next moment. When is this going to happen? When is when you know that blueprint, it doesn't really ruin the experience for you. At least not for me. It makes it more interesting, because when you watch a movie, you get this sense that it's amazing that they can actually do that they can make stories that are so different, seemingly so different, but they're basically the same story again and again being told. And of course, Hollywood has been scorned a little bit for this. They have been criticized for being too formulaic, and that is also true. They can abuse this blueprint, and they do with a lot of the blockbuster movies. They just basically put the blueprint there, and they make they make it exactly as the blueprint, but not always. The movie doesn't have to be necessarily become a good movie, but it still works because it hits all the right spots. So they still make tons of money, just have nice effects and visuals, and based on the hero's journey blueprint, and that's enough for drawing a big audience who doesn't even know that they're watching the same story unfold time and time again. So here is the well-known, if you search for the hero's journey and Google Images, you find this one a lot, and it's basically just the circle of the journey in a diagram's form. And I will go into every major plot point. So you start out at the beginning, and then you have the call to adventure, and then you cross the threshold into the unknown, and maybe there's a mentor or a helper coming in at this point, and there will be some challenges and temptations, and then there is a death rebirth moment, and a transformation, and an atonement, and a return to from the upside down unknown world of the subconscious of the unknown, and back into the ordinary world. But then the hero has changed, and the hero has gained wisdom, and he brings that back to the ordinary world. That is basically very quickly how it works. But I will give you guys who listen to this two very good examples. So I will walk through The Matrix and the original Star Wars, and what I'm going to analyze them is I'm not using the hero's journey blueprint from Vogler, but a guy called Blake Snyder, and his book Save the Cat, in which he has something he calls a beat sheet, and that is basically just a sheet that lists up all the major plot points and explains each one of them in detail. and how and it's a guide with even page numbers for each plot point, and how writers are supposed to write good movie scripts. And he was himself a screenwriter, and I think he died a couple of years ago or something, but he wrote Save the Cat and also several other books in the same category. The Save the Cat is the original, where he talks about the blueprint and the hero's journey in his own version of it, and then he has a book later that analyzes, I think, 50 different movies from 5 different genres, in which he explains how each one of them fits into his specific beat sheet blueprint or hero's journey blueprint. So what I will do, I will use his blueprint. I will look at The Matrix and Star Wars as an example and fitting it into his blueprint. So the movie starts with an opening image or an opening shot, and this is a visual that represents the struggle or the tone of the story. It's a snapshot of the hero's problem or problems before the adventure begins. So in The Matrix, the movie starts with a blinking command line cursor, and this is obviously very telling about what this movie is about. It's a digital reality, and it's the blinking cursor is like an open line of what's going to happen. Nobody knows. It's like the blank sheet of a movie script, and the movie can unfold from there. So it's a very good opening and symbolic opening. And in Star Wars, we see that the tiny rebel ship versus the might of the gigantic empire who is chasing that tiny rebel ship. So that is also very symbolic about what this movie is about. It's the powerful, big, gigantic empire, scary empire against the small but still a potent rebel, who has goodness and the truth on their side. So it's also very symbolic, legendary opening. So after the opening shot, then there is the setup of the movie, and in the setup you get presented. The main characters are introduced, and their so-called ordinary world is also introduced, and it's usually riddled with problems, and there is something missing in the hero's life. And in Neo's case, he's kind of bored with his life, and he senses that there is something more to reality. But he has a day job, and he is also a hacker at moonlighting as a hacker and whatnot after work. And you're introduced to his future friends who are free from the Matrix, but they're being chased by the agents, and they're looking for their savior, which they think could be Neo. And in Star Wars, you can see Luke is trapped as a farm boy or a slave on a slave planet, and he's dreaming of going to the academy to become a Jedi. And then Princess Leia gets in trouble, and she sends a message with the robot R2-D2 right before she's captured by Darth Vader. And R2-D2 and his robot friend, they manage to escape, and they end up somehow on the planet where Luke is, and they're being bought by Luke's aunt and uncle, which he lives with. So that's the setup of Star Wars and The Matrix. And then in the setup, there is something called team stated that happens within the setup. The setup is usually like between 5 and 10 pages of the script. So the team stated, that is usually in a movie, the theme of the movie or the core message or the deeper truth that is not fully realized at this point. It's usually spoken either to the main character or in his presence. Not always, but usually. But when it's spoken directly out, maybe in a subtle way, not directly, but it can be subtle, the hero doesn't understand because he doesn't have experience. But it's what the theme of the movie, what it is about, and the underlying truth that the hero is seeking. So Neo, he moonlights as a creator of illegal software, and one of his customers tells Neo that he looks like he needs to unplug for a while. So that seems very innocent, but the whole movie is about unplugging from the Matrix, so it's a very, very clever symbolic statement of the theme. And in Star Wars, Luke's aunt says to her husband that Luke, he's just not a farmer, he has too much of his father in him. And this, obviously, everybody remembers the famous scene when Darth Vader fights with Luke, and he says, Luke, I am your father. So this points ahead to that, and it's also followed by the very famous twin Sunset theme with the amazing Luke theme music. And it shows that Luke has a potential, even a genetic potential, and he's longing for adventure. So then after this, there's a catalyst. That's when something unexpected happens to the hero, and his life is about to be turned upside down. This is when the movie starts to really take off, when something really happens. And in the Matrix, Neo meets with Trinity in a nightclub, and she tells him that he's in danger. And Luke, in Star Wars, he sees the hologram of Princess Leia in distress, and from the robot they bought, his uncle and aunt bought the robot, and the robot displays this hologram in which Princess Leia calls for help. She says, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope." And then there is a debate following that, and following the catalyst or the call to action, there is a debate, because the hero fears, or the would-be hero he's still not a hero, but he's getting there. He has a fear of the unknown, like everybody has a fear of the unknown. So there is a hesitation once the catalyst has happened, and the hero is being pushed, into a different reality. There is hesitation, there is self-doubt and reluctance, because the hero is scared of the unknown and scared of change. This is called a debate. In Matrix, Neo is not strong enough to follow through on Morpheus' orders to escape from the agents coming after him in his office. And in the Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi asks Luke to learn the ways of the Jedi, but he refuses. He refuses, even though this is what he's longing for. He still refuses this at this point. And that's the end of Act 1. The movie is always in 3 acts, so now we're breaking into Act 2. So this is when the hero is forced or moved to take firm action, to venture into the unknown, and is going beyond the point of any return. And the hero is now leaving the ordinary world behind. His known common reality that he is used to, he's leaving that behind, and he's venturing with full force into the unknown. And in the Matrix, everybody remembers, that's the famous scene when Neo takes the red pill and is dramatically unplugged from the Matrix and is thrown into a completely different reality. And in Star Wars, Luke finds that his farm has been destroyed and his family has been killed. So he then decides to leave his ordinary world behind and go with Obi-Wan Kenobi on the mission to reunite R2-D2 with Princess Leia and fight for the rebellion.